So I used to use the Rode Wireless Go 2, and it's a great mic, but it only recorded straight into the camera via a 3.5mm jack. Now that's fine, that's okay, but to be honest, after a while, the mic inputs on my cameras broke, and I couldn't use the 3.5mm jack, so I couldn't record into the camera. And at the time, this is going back years, I didn't have a second camera. I had one camera to make my money with, so I couldn't afford, not like financially, but I couldn't afford the time to send it off to Japan or some repair house to get it fixed. So I needed a new microphone. I wanted 32-bit float recording, so that I wouldn't have to worry about setting the gain or clipping. 32-bit float's basically raw but for audio. And I also wanted to record locally to the mic packs rather than only straight into camera. And the reason for that was because I didn't want to pick up any audio interference or have dropout issues and things like that. And plus I figured the DACs in the transmitter packs are probably better than the ones built into the camera, so the audio could sound better. I looked around and I found the Zoom F2. The Zoom F2 is really good because it provided this, and it was a good quality DAC, a really good quality digital audio converter, so the sound was a little bit better than what was in the camera that I was using before. But it was 32-bit float, so when I'm filming events and I've got literally 3 minutes with someone, I've just grabbed someone from the room, I need to interview you, I need to find out who you are, your company, I want to find out why you've come to the conference and, bit of detail, bit of story. So just stick a mic on someone and press record and not worry about it. I don't have to check the gain, I don't have to worry about any of that, I can just focus on them and interviewing them well. It was brilliant, it was a game changer. It was so much easier for me to just do that. The noise floor was really low on these mics, so the audio was clean. Even if the signal was low, I could push the signal really far in post and still get a clean, very usable recording without any risk of distortion. And through using these mics over the previous Rode Wireless Go's I realised I'm getting that 32-bit float and I'm immune to disturbance. There's no wireless interference, there's no risk of dropouts. It was a good, local, clean audio signal. It was brilliant. And that worked really well for a good while. I had no reason to keep tabs on what else was available on the market. But there were issues in the end. I started recording longer content out of the studio where the Zoom F2, yes, I felt confident that the audio wasn't going to cut out or it wasn't going to clip. But what if the battery died? I had no way to monitor the battery levels. And what if the subject somehow knocked a button and it stopped the recording? Albeit the latter was never really an issue for me. The lock switch on the record button works really well, but anyway, since then I've got more cameras, and these cameras have working 3.5mm jacks for now. And I guess I was just in the market for something where I could record multiple tracks at once. I then came across the Rode Wireless Pro. Recording 32-bit float, they also transmit to camera, and I have the feedback. I can see the battery levels, and even though I don't use the in-cam audio because I want to use the 32-bit float, it's really useful to have that visual feedback and being able to monitor the audio as you record it. Plus it makes syncing in the edit a lot easier too because you've got a clearer waveform. And having that audio feedback is really important for a number of reasons. The problem with the local mic setup that I had before is I had no idea if the battery had died or if it was even still recording. What if the subject sat down and pressed a button on the mic pack in their pocket and it stopped the recording? I would have no idea. Thankfully, this never happened because the hold lock buttons on the Zoom F2s are really strong and have never let me down, but that level of fear and uncertainty on a shoot situation is just not what you need. There are ways around it because there is an output on the Zoom F2 and you can, I did actually attach this to the Rode Wireless Go and had that plugged into some earphones and that worked really well. But it was a bit clunky and, just so many layers and things to keep track of in terms of battery life. I didn't really need that. So I got myself the Rode Wireless Pro. What I really like about the Wireless Pro is the fact that they come in this really nice charging case. Just by virtue of putting them away in between takes, I'm getting charge out of them. At first I was concerned because I thought, it's an internal battery. You can't replace the battery. You can't go from 0% to 100% in seconds. Whereas if you can replace the battery like you can on the Zoom F2, you can do that, which is really, really useful. You can't do that with these, but to be honest, the batteries are so good, they last at least 7 hours on a single charge. Usually you do have at least 30 minutes to just have a break, have lunch, top them up during that time, and then keep shooting. Like, rarely are you shooting 7 hours continuously without a break. I can also make sure that they sound good, because when you're trying to hide these mics behind clothing and that sort of thing, you're going to get clothes rustling, you're going to get wind noise and disturbance and things like that. Occasionally you might actually get wireless disturbance as well, but again, because 32-bit float local, I don't have to worry about that. There's a backup recording there. I will admit that I did forget to press record on the mics at one point, but because I was recording in camera, it was fine and I had the signal. But yeah, I guess I'm just getting used to the new workflow, so I just forgot to press record this one time. That said though, there is one tip that I've got with these mics. So what's really good is you can press the record button at the receiver end on the camera, and it'll send a signal to both the transmitters and it'll start them both recording. The reason why this is really useful is because usually when you've mic'd up a subject, there's about 10-15 minutes of just chit chat until you actually start recording the stuff you need. So with the previous mics I was using, this would result in 10 to 15 minutes of just unnecessary audio. This would take up space, although my memory cards are quite big, so it was never really an issue in the real world, but it would take up space, it would take up editing time, because I've got to sift through this and find what I actually need. Whereas to be able to just press record after the subject sat down and they're comfortable, I don't need to go near them, I don't need to ask them to take the mic pack out of their pocket, I can just press record on my end without them even knowing that I'm doing it. It's just a much better workflow, and I've been enjoying that much more with this. But yeah, one tip that I've got though with these mics is there's a function button. The problem with the function button is that by default, I think it's set to mute. So the problem with that is if the subject sits down, they could hit this by mistake and then they've muted the mic. But again, because I've got that visual and audio feedback on the receiver end and I can listen to it as well with the headphones, I can see and I can hear that it's been muted, so we can fix that. Whereas with the previous mics, I had no idea. I couldn't monitor it. I didn't know what the sound was going to be like. You know, you can see these things and fix them. The tip I've got is to plug the transmitters into your phone or your computer, and with the Rode Control app, you can basically map that function button. You can make it either mute, you can make it set a marker, or you can just turn it off. So I would recommend either off or marker for this. So far, I've never really needed the use of the markers, because if I need to set a marker, I'm not really in a position to like get the mic pack to press the marker button, because obviously we're mid-take and the subject's got it in their pocket or something. So, you know, but at least it's not going to disrupt the recording or do anything like that if it gets pressed by mistake, is my point. So yeah, definitely remap that function button so that it's not mute, because that's not really useful for my use. What's also really nice is you get these little windshields, which is really cool. There are windshields that can fit onto the lav mics, and you can also get ones that lock onto the actual transmitters themselves if you're using them that way. And that's really cool because they're secure. One thing that I'd say though is they don't actually block clothes rustling. They block wind noise quite well, but clothes rustling and kind of scratchiness, they're not going to block that fully. So you do need to mind how you mount your mics onto your subjects because of that reason. The aftermarket windshields that I got for my Zoom F2 mics, I forget the brand to be honest, but they're really good and I've never had any issues. I'm fully confident I can stick them on top of the lav mic and they'll just block everything. The problem is they're a bit of an eyesore, but that's because they're bulky and that's because they're good. So kind of pick what you want essentially. That said though, a lot of people these days, they talk into the mic like this and don't seem to bother trying to hide it. I don't really understand that trend. I'm not going to start doing that trend. It doesn't really work for me, but makes you wonder why you bother sometimes. One thing worth mentioning though is data transfer speed. When you plug a microphone via USB-C into your computer, the data transfer speed is I've never seen it more than 5 megabytes per second. On this one particular occasion here, it was no more than 1 megabyte per second, which is really slow, and it really shouldn't take 12 minutes to transfer 4 gigabytes. With my old microphones, the Zoom F2, because they were on an SD card, it was much faster to transfer the data. It's basically instant. Yeah, not sure what's happening here. Let me know in the comments if you've had a similar experience. But yeah, so that's it. They're really good mics. I enjoy them. I'm going to be using them going forward, especially with the content that I'm doing, a lot of walk and talk podcast content on the move, where I've got 2 people having a conversation. Having these mics that are time code locked is so much easier for me rather than having 2 separate mics recording independently. And the fact that I can have the 32-bit float recording but also record a backup straight into the camera wirelessly, that's really helpful as well. And I think the price point's decent. Obviously they cost more than what my Zoom F2s cost me, but these weren't available when I bought those, and for a slightly larger outlay, I do think it's worth it. Yes, you can't replace the batteries to get that instant 0 to 100%, but as long as you can manage that and you can keep tabs and you can make sure you begin every shoot at 100%, then to be honest, you're going to be fine. So yeah, basically, decent set of mics, no complaints. I look forward to using them more as I continue my work in freelance. That's my review. Thank you for watching. See you next time.